This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own moves. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello and welcome back once again to North Pod. I know it has been a little while. It's been a couple of weeks. Sorry I've been absent. I've just been a bit busy at work. So I had meant to make a podcast a little earlier, but I just thought, look, after it got a little late, I thought, let's wait until halfway through the trade period. We'll have a little midway review and then, that's where we've got to. So sorry if you've been sitting by your phone waiting for that update, but we're finally here and there is heaps to talk about since we last spoke. I've tried my best to make a note of everything as I've gone, but I'm sure there'll be a couple of little things that I've missed. We've got trade talk, a bit of delisting, and got some assistant coaches, got some rumours, some compensation. There's plenty to go through. So, and we'll also talk about the AFLW at the end because it's been a couple of weeks since I've given an update on that too. So, plenty to go through. It's not in any particular order other than it's the order that I wrote down in. So it's probably loosely chronological, but not perfectly. So don't hold me to that. Let's jump right in. We've been busy with the trade period and the delisting, and one of the first things that happened was Daniel Howe retiring. So a really sad day for I can't even finish that sentence. It was probably not a big surprise. I did wonder if he was going to want to go around again. And it's one of those ones that you look at and you probably think he's been told that he's going to be delisted, but he's been given the chance to retire if he likes, because, I mean, he's not old. I think he's late 20s, so he certainly had some footy left in him if he wanted to, but he's obviously opted to retire from AFL football. So, yeah, I think, to be honest, that's a positive. He's a list clogger. He's a player that sort of good enough to get a game as depth, but I don't think brought much to the table. He had a couple of howlers throughout the year, and he filled a bit of a list gap for us for the year, but to be honest, I would have preferred some younger players getting those games. Regardless, he won't be on the list next year, so we can move on from Daniel Howe and wish him all the best. But I think I was pleasantly surprised. I really thought that potentially he was going to go around again. He seems like one of Clarko's boys, so not the case. And around the same time as that, we got confirmation of those four players that had been rumoured or kind of reported that they had got 1 year deals. So that's Liam Shields, Free, Drury, and Dawson all got 1 year deals confirmed by the club. So super positive. I think Shields, as compared to Howe, brought something to the side this year. He was super consistent. And whilst I certainly hope he's not playing every game for us in 2024, I think he's a really valuable senior body and someone that if he plays sort of 15, 16 games, maybe plays a couple as the sub. But he's certainly there if we happen to come across an injury crisis. I think he'll be super valuable. Free, we can't avoid to get rid of because the ruck stocks are pretty low, which we'll talk about in a minute. So hopefully he can get a good run at it in the VFL next year and possibly put some pressure on our rucks to get a game. And Drury had a couple of games this year, showed a little bit, didn't show a lot, but rookies I feel pretty easy to give them another crack. They're cheap. We've got extra rookie spots, so yeah, great to see him getting another go because all the talk is that he's a fantastic leader. So that's a sort of player that if he can find some form, you want to be able to have those guys around the club. And finally, Callan Dawson, super important that we kept him on the list. We know our key defensive stocks are low, and whilst Callan Dawson hasn't been setting the world on fire in the VFL. He showed a bit in that last round game against the Gold Coast, and we just need anyone who, is 190 plus and can play in defence. So he's got another year. I wonder if Griffin Logue hadn't done his ACL, whether he might have been finding himself on the scrap heap, but that doesn't matter because Logue did do his knee, and we are going to need Callum Dawson next year, I think, particularly given we haven't traded for any key defenders as yet. So yeah, all four of those getting deals confirmed. We did know about it. It had been reported by some reliable journalists, but it's good to have that out. So there's just a couple of players now without contracts that are listed, and I'll talk about them a little bit later, but the list is starting to take some shape. Then we've got a couple of assistant coaching appointments. So we've got Michael Barlow, Jed Adcock, and Xavier Clark all coming across to the club. I feel like this kind of stuff is not as appealing to the general supporter. It's not something that we necessarily see much of, but it is super important that obviously it's not just the head coach in Clarko, it is the group around him, and they do make a big difference. So Barlow has come across from the Werribee VFL side. They were the grand finalists. They lost to the Gold Coast in the VFL this year, and he's going to come across and do development coaching. So super exciting, or super potentially exciting, to have someone developing those younger players. It's been an issue the last couple of years. It's been well documented. It's been talked about a lot that our development of young talent hasn't necessarily been a strength. So hopefully Michael can come across and sort that out. And Jed Adcock's coming across from Brisbane. He's just going to be an assistant coach. Not sure if that's a line coach or what kind of assistant, but he's coming in similar to Xavier Clark as well, actually, who's come across from Richmond. So I'm sure we'll find out more, or maybe it exists, but I haven't read it, in terms of what specifically they'll be doing in their assistant coaching roles. And as I said, I think the general supporter doesn't really care. So just, I guess, to note that I guess the assistant coaches are changing a fair bit. We know we've had a bit of a clear out there. I think Clarko's really trying to make sure that we've got all full-timers working in there. And I think he's cleared out some of the staff that have been there for a while and potentially weren't performing, or we just needed a fresh start. Like, it's from the outside, I've got no idea, but I think it's exciting to have some new faces coming in. Then we are going to have a look at the trade period properly. So all that stuff's kind of happened outside the trade period. Been going for about a week and a half, or free agency started a couple of Fridays ago. So as I said, this is not in any particular order. I think I'll start with Toby Pink, who we have signed as a delisted free agent out of the Sandful. I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen a lot of him. All I've really watched is the couple of minutes of highlights that the club's sent out since we signed him. He's a 25-year-old defender. He's 194. So he's been AFL listed before. He was on Sydney's list for quite a while, and then he's been plying his trade in the in the Sandful lately. In 2020, he actually signed on to be part of North Melbourne's VFL side before that season was cancelled due to the pandemic. So we've had our eyes on him for a little while. Yeah, I don't really have much to say other than I think it was important that we signed someone like this. There's not a heap of key defensive talent floating around in the trade and the free agency space, so we didn't have a lot of options in that regard. He's a speculative pick. He's a ready-made body, but yeah, I think it's important to note that he was on an AFL list for quite a while and wasn't able to make it. But there's plenty of examples of players that have been in that situation and then, gone back to second level footy, whether that's VFL or the Waffle or Sandful, and made some changes. Pink was he was drafted as a forward and tried at AFL clubs as a forward, so he's gone back to Sandful and been turned into a defender, which I think is a pretty common story. He is 194, so He's that borderline, can he play on the absolute big players? I mean, I'm sure he'll be asked to potentially, but you would love him to be sort of 4 or 5 centimetres taller if we were replacing Ben Mackay's height, if we want to look at it that way, because he's the next player we're going to talk about. So, yeah, no idea whether or not he's going to break into that starting defence, whether we see Dawson or Pink as that player that's going to replace Logue for the first half of the year. I've got no idea at this point. I'm sure we'll see what that looks like as the preseason gets going later in the year and early next year. Who knows, maybe it's a drafted player, but I think it was important that we got someone in that can play key defensive posts, so that was good to see. I just spoke about it. Ben Mackay officially left. We knew it was happening, and that compensation came through as pick 3 confirmed, which has upset a lot of people. But I think, as North supporters, we're just using the system that exists there. So if we had won the premiership, we would have got pick 19. We did not go close to winning the premiership, so pick 3 it was for us. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like from all the talk, we essentially, once we realised that he was looking to explore his options potentially kind of this time last year or even earlier than that, it seems like North Melbourne made a choice that, knowing that we would get first round compensation after our pick, or at least hoping that was the case, it looks like we made the decision not to even really offer him a contract. I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's going to be one of those ones where we have to review it, in 5 years' time when we can see what Mackay has gone on to do and we can see what we're able to do with that compensation. But, I mean, yeah, all the speculation seems to be that the club essentially decided that they'd prefer to have the draft pick. So, and it's so fascinating watching how it turns out now. I know he's played 70-odd games. He goes to Essendon. There's all this... I feel like the mainstream media talk is, gee, he's an unproven player. We'll have to see. And sure, he's played 70 games, but I think to call him an unproven player is pretty crazy, to be honest. I think he's got, 3 or 4 years of footy where he's played, a fair bit of the football and has proven that he can take on certainly the number 2 and most often the number 1 defender of the opposition. And under a fair bit of duress, let's be honest, like North Melbourne's defence over the past 3 or 4 years has been under duress significantly. He's held up okay. Like, sure, he hasn't been a superstar by any stretch, but I just can't wait, and I can see it happening. He goes to Essendon, he plays exactly the way that he played for North Melbourne, and he's going to be a superstar, I think. So, look, let's wait and see. But I can just see that happening. I honestly felt like that happened a bit with Josh Gibson when he left to go to Hawthorn all those years ago. He played solid football for North Melbourne. He probably stepped it up slightly in Hawthorn, and all of a sudden he was an absolute gun. It's just how the media or mainstream media works. If you play for a big club, a big successful club, you're going to get the accolades. It's just, it's part and parcel of being North Melbourne, I guess. So, yeah, honestly, I wish him all the best. Having listened to most of his podcasts this year, he seems like, pretty intelligent, nice guy. And I don't think there's any ill feeling between him and the playing group. I wasn't in the camp that thought he'd checked out. I just think that, he started the season pretty quietly, missed the first couple of games with injury, and then struggled a little bit to adapt to the new game style. And then after that, I thought he was pretty good. So, yeah, I definitely would prefer to have him, but we'll have to see what that draft pick can turn into, I guess. Next person leaving, Todd Goldstein officially off to Essendon, so joining Ben Mackay over there. Everyone's going to Essendon, to be honest. They've picked up Jade Gresham. There's talk that they're going to pick up Xavier Dersma from Port Adelaide, so they're all in by the looks of Essendon. They're really going for it, and power to them. Like, we were there sort of circa 2013, 14, 15. We went for it, and we were able to get to 2 prelims, but weren't able to quite get the job done. So, yeah, we'll have to see how they go. But Todd Goldstein's officially left, so it sounds as though he's got a 1-year contract plus potentially coaching a year after that. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see. I wouldn't have picked Essendon as a destination for him on the basis of I'm not sure, if the success and the opportunity is going to be there. It sounds like he was picking between Essendon and Collingwood, and I think, to my mind, Collingwood's certainly a better place to have immediate success, and there's also more of an opportunity there, but he also, like Ben Mackay, actually, both of them were Essendon supporters growing up. So maybe that was a part of the decision. Look, who knows? But certainly wish Goldie all the best. He's been an absolute servant of the club, and I don't blame him for seeking opportunity elsewhere because he's had opportunities to do it in the past and he's chosen not to. So he's absolutely stuck by us. He's obviously been told that the opportunity is not going to be there for him next year, and if he wants to seek other opportunities, he can. And he's left as an unrestricted free agent and no compensation for him, which is fair enough because it's just the 1 year deal at Essendon. So there's the outs. Let's have a look at the ins. So we've had 2 players come in plus a pick swap happen so far as I recording this on Sunday. So there's 3 days of the trade period left to go after this. And often there's a fair bit that happens in the last couple of days. That being said, not a heap's been talked about North Melbourne making a heap of moves, so there mightn't be much more that happens after this point, but we'll have a look. The first deal that we got done was Dylan Stephens from the Sydney Swans, that winger, former number 5 pick, who sort of fell out of favour this year with the rise of Errol Goulden and a couple of others at Sydney. So we were able to snag him. We got Dylan Stephens and pick 25, and we sent out pick 44 and one of our end of first rounders for 2024, which is currently pick 19. So when you look at it, essentially we've got Dylan Stephens and we've sort of downgraded our pick from 19 next year to 25 this year. And that 19, is probably going to be more like 21, 22 next year. And we had to trade it. And we've gotten rid of 44. So I guess there's a bit of balance there. I think this is a great deal. I do worry because Dylan Stephens is the sort of player that we've picked up several of in the past and it hasn't worked in terms of former high draft pick out of favour at their club. Makes me think of Paul Ahern. Aidan Bonner could probably fit into that category too. There's been several. So I hope that Dylan Stephens works out better for us. I think by the looks of it, he's going to slot onto that other wing alongside Bailey Scott. He's that left footer, which we know Alistair Clarkson loves. So yeah, snagged him. It had been talked about. I think, when you look at it, we had to get rid of those first round picks. For the 2024 draft, it was absolutely no incentive in keeping them. So in some ways that reduces their value slightly because clubs know that we want to get rid of them, but fantastic job getting rid of that and getting 25 back with Stephens. Essentially, that's an early second round pick and something that of value. It's not steak knives. So fantastic trade. I think he goes straight into our starting 22 next year on the wing, at least in my mind. I'm sure, as I said earlier, with Toby Pink, there'll be stuff to play out in the preseason, but I can't see a reason why Dylan Stephens wouldn't fit in. That's why we've obviously identified him as someone that we want to get because he feels a need on that wing. And that's going to put pressure on someone like Curtis Taylor for their position, who was already in danger this year, but that's the kind of player that was playing on the wing sometimes. Jack Marnie had a couple of games on there before his shoulder really carked it. So yeah, that's a fantastic get. We also got Zach Fisher. So Fisher in pick 17 in, and we lost pick 21 and pick 25. So we just gotten pick 25 from the Dylan Stephens trade. We traded it straight back out along with pick 21, and we got Zach Fisher and pick 17. So if you think about it, you think Fisher is around pick 25, and we've even gone forward. We've gone from 21 up to 17. So it's another trade where we've tried to upgrade our picks slightly and get a player in. Similar again, I think this is a fantastic deal. If you think about, we got Fisher for about, I don't know, if you maybe like 28, 29, like that's kind of the value, I guess, that you'd put on it, maybe even 30, given that we upgraded our other pick. He's versatile. I have, of the three players that we've gotten in, if we include Pink, Fisher's the one that I've seen the most of. What interests me is I'm not certain what position we've recruited him for. And I think this is something that will play out sort of early next year. But, I don't know if he's going to play half-back or half-forward. My suspicion is that he's going to play off half-back and potentially free up someone like Sheasel to move into the midfield or to move forward. But my only thoughts around that is because we know we have such a plethora of half-forwards. It would seem silly to recruit Fisher for that role, given he's not dissimilar to a lot of the types that we already have. He probably is a little closer to a small pressure forward than some of them, but yeah, my suspicion is he's going to play off half-back, which maybe puts a bit more pressure on someone like Bergman or Gota or even Luke McDonald. That's the kind of releasing defender that he is. I don't imagine that Fisher's going to be playing much midfield time. I know there was some talk that that's why he wanted out of Carlton, but I mean, potentially he's been told by Carlton he's just not going to get games, and he's going to get games at North Melbourne. So I think he's another good pickup. I think it's probably just worth noting at this point, we haven't landed any big fish. We've got a delisted free agent playing Sandful, and we've got two players who are fringe players at their clubs. So on one hand, you can look at it and go, gee, like, it's not super exciting. But you have to remember, we are a small club who sits at the bottom of the ladder at the moment, and this is the way that we're going to make incremental improvements. We've got to take gambles on players like this and sort of, hope that they are an upgrade on our current players playing those positions. It's just not feasible that we're going to get, a top 50 player and slot them into our side. It's just the way that we're getting players like that is through the draft. We're not getting free agents or trades that are going to want to come to the club at the moment. That's where Essendon's at right now, in that middle part of the ladder where they're wanting to push up, and that they are an attractive option for players who are in other teams' best 22s. We've got to try and pluck those players that are 23rd, 24th, 25th best players at their sides and make them, our 15th or our 14th best player, if we want to look at it simplistically. So I think whilst Stevens and Fisher aren't massive additions, that they're probably improvements on the players that we currently have playing those positions. That's what we need to do at the point that we're at as a club. We've got to make these incremental improvements. The other trade that we made, it was in a multi-club swap, but in terms of our involvement, we got pick 18 in this year's draft, and we traded out the other one of our end of first round 2024 picks to the Gold Coast. So essentially that was pick 20 for next year. We've got pick 18 for this year. We've stockpiled. We've done what we had to do there. That pick needed to be traded out. We've swapped it for something that's pretty much the same value. Potentially next year's draft is a little bit deeper, so that's why someone might see that as even, because we have jumped up a couple of spots. But yeah, pick 18. So we're really stockpiling picks in the sort of top 25 of this year's draft. It'll be interesting to see if we try and consolidate some of those and move further up. I think that's going to be tricky to do at this point. I think a lot of the people that were wanting to auction off their picks in that top sort of 12, I think that's sort of done. We've missed the boat on getting any of those big pieces, I think, but you never know what can happen in these last couple of days, and we've certainly got plenty of good picks to take to the draft if we want to. So that's what's happened. In terms of what potentially could happen, or it seems like is going to happen, Nick Haynes, there'd been rumours and I guess speculation that he was going to come across to North. It sounds as though that's unlikely. It's just one of those ones that's changed. Every day it's a slightly different story. At one point, he's definitely coming to North, but there's going to be no salary. It's not a salary dumping scenario. Like, they want because Haynes on a big deal worth potentially up to 1.2 because he's back-ended his money, done the right thing by the Giants. Then a couple of days later, Haynes is definitely on the table, and there's a salary dump scenario where the Giants might throw in a draft pick to try and entice sides. All the reporting from sort of the reliable journalists seems to suggest that he doesn't want to leave, and that the Giants are happy enough to keep him as depth. So I think he would have been. He's the sort of player that I would have loved to get for a couple of years, but by the same token, you're not devastated to miss out on him. He's in his 30s and not going to be a long-term prospect. Biggie Nguyen, who is someone that I have not seen or heard much of from Richmond. There was some talk that we were going to get him as a free agent. It looks like, that hasn't happened because free agency is closed. It sounds as though potentially that might have diluted the conversation that we got for Ben Mackay. So I think by the looks of it, we'll either pick him up as a delisted free agent if Richmond chooses to delist him, or we might use one of our really late picks to trade him so that it doesn't dilute that free agency. So all reports are he's going to come across. He's another tool that we're looking to add. So initially there was some interest in Mabio Chol, who is another former Richmond player, currently at the Gold Coast, but it sounds as though he's going to get to Hawthorn. So Biggie Nguyen's who we're targeting. As I said, I really don't know much about him. I just know he's a tool and not in Richmond's future plans or in their best sort of 25. So again, he might be a depth pickup, but that's where that one sits. There's also been some rumours around Jack Darling potentially coming to North. Look, if it was 5 years ago, maybe. That's kind of my thoughts. I understand that why West Coast might potentially want to part with him because he's potentially got a little bit of value left and it might be a good time to sell. But if I was Darling, and I just don't think it doesn't make sense to me from a matchup perspective. I think we should be looking at tall forwards who are younger, and I just don't know. I think Darling should be looking to go to a club that are on the precipice. So it's a no from me for Darling. Can't wait to eat my words in a couple of days. But I just don't think he's the right fit for us. I don't think we need, someone at that stage. I mean, he's not West Coast best tall forward. He's a second or a third tall at this point in his career. And I'm not having him. So it's a no from me. The last thing that's kind of, I guess there's been a lot of talk that North Melbourne is trying to trade for the number one pick, which just don't get me started on the irony of that, given that we did hold the number one draft pick for a week there until we beat Gold Coast in the last round. So there's lots of talk that we're looking to trade up. All along, I've been of the school of thought that I just don't think it's worth trading up to pick one because I think West Coast is going to want too much for it. And I think, there's been, apparently we threw up 4 picks. We threw up a 15, 17, 18 and another first round pick. And that was rejected because none of those picks were early enough. I think ultimately West Coast is going to want pick 2. I don't even think pick 3 would work for them. I really think they're only prepared to slide down one spot. And then you've got to look at it from, sure, if we can give them pick 2, what else are they going to want? It sounds as though pick 2 and a 15 or a 17 is not going to get it done. And if you have to give up pick 2 and pick 15 and something else, that's where I start to go, look, is it worth moving up, like spending that to move up one spot? And I'm just not sure it is because of the player that's there. I totally get, I think Harley Reid would be an amazing get for North Melbourne, and it's not out of the question. I think I personally, because he's such a marketable player, I can see why we would want to get someone like that. We have so many midfielders, and he would certainly be an upgrade to our midfield, don't get me wrong, but his position is not the biggest area of need, so I don't think we should be overspending. I've no doubt that we're going to pick up a midfielder or two in this year's draft because often the best players are midfielders. I just am not certain that we need to go after the number one pick because of the cost being attached to it. I think we let West Coast go to the draft with pick 1. And if they take Harley Reid, great. We've got picks 2 and 3, and we can decide the best 2 fits for us are at that point. And we've also got 15, 17, and 18, where you're going to get some pretty good players too. But there's always a chance that West Coast don't want to risk it on Reid and they take Daniel Curtin. I think that's unlikely because all the talk is that Reid's such a generational player that you'd be silly not to take him. And I think from West Coast's perspective, if they, just trying to put myself in their shoes, if they take him and in 3 years' time he does want to leave, it's still going to be a massive, like you're going to recoup your cost because the trade value of him is going to be huge. Like I think personally it's a no-brainer that they take Harley Reid. They bank themselves on being able to convince him to stay. And then if he doesn't, you just ask for a heap, in return. And it's not like he's going home is going to be to Victoria and there's 10 clubs in Victoria that can compete for him. So I think we're not going to end up with pick 1. I think the price is going to be too much. I could see a situation where we try and package up 15, 17, and 18 or some of those and try and move one of those picks up a bit further. But I just don't know if the opportunity is going to be there to do that. All the talk is that this draft there's a really good bunch of about 12 players. And then after that, it's a fair drop-off. It's not a super deep draft. But the top-end talent is elite. That's the talk. So I think North Melbourne really wants to get 3 picks in that elite area where it's the sort of top 12, top 13. But we'll have to wait and see if they're able to. Certainly, we're going to have at least 2 players that could potentially play, in rounds 1, 2, or 3, like early in the year. Particularly if we pick a midfield type, because we know that midfielders are capable of coming in and starting at half forward or half back round 1. It's just those ruckmen, key forwards, key backs, even those smaller pressure forwards that can sometimes take a bit more time. So, yeah, our best 23 at the start of next year is going to look pretty different, I think. But yeah, as it stands, draft picks 2, 3, 15, 17, 18, 57, 65. I wouldn't expect that 65 we'll use. 57 we may not even use, or we may use that one of those last 2 to trade for Biggie Newen. So at this stage, it looks like we've got 5 picks that we might actually take. We'll have to wait and see. As I said, there's 3 days of trade period left. We'll have to wait and see what we want to do with those picks. And I still have no idea. There's so much water to go under the bridge, and I think I think Brady Rawlings has still got a few things to try. So if he's able to use pick 2 and not too much to get to 1, I'm okay with it. But he definitely don't, from my perspective, don't overspend. That's my message if you're listening, Brady, which I'm sure you are. Just a quick little look ahead. So I thought before the trade period, what we needed was some more rebounding defenders. I think we've potentially got that with Zach Fisher. Another reliable key defender. Look, we've got Toby Pink, but I definitely think we'll need another key defender either through the draft or through delisted free agency. We are going to need someone else. A project ruckman and a best 22 capable ruckman. Neither of those have eventuated yet. I do wonder. It seems to me like the vibe coming out is that North potentially see Coleman Jones as someone who can play more ruck time. Just reading the room there doesn't seem to be much urgency with getting a ruckman. I still feel like we'll get one at some point through trading, drafting, or free agency. There's going to be some kind of scrap heap type ruckman that I think ends up with North. But yeah, I think Cherry, Coleman Jones, and Free they seem to be pretty happy with, which is surprising, but also somewhat heartening because I think we're all a bit concerned about Cherry. I certainly haven't written him off, and I don't think North Melbourne has yet either. Another key position player who can play at either end of the ground. So that is still that's a TBC. Toby Pink, I guess, technically is that player, but I think Biggie Newen's probably that one that we want to get in. as some depth for that key position spot, or potentially, it might be that we're getting Daniel Curtin or some other key position player through the draft. And then I've said upgrades at the half forward / forward pocket position. Yeah, I think that's a TBC as well. I'm really keen on Nick Watson. I'm not sure that we're going to get him. I haven't heard him mentioned much with respect to North Melbourne. It sounds like we've kind of got our eyes on Curtin and then a mid like a Dersma or a McKercher, someone like that. But again, all that can change if we end up with pick 1. So they were my thoughts prior to the trading period. I just did a little exercise myself where I kind of looked at what our best 22 might look like for next year. And then I tried to evaluate who are the players that I'm pretty sure, are good future players for us, like that could play the next 5 years and hold down their positions. So I thought Sheasel and Logue are that in the back line. I thought in the forward line, Curtis, Zerha, Larky and Stevenson are that. And then through the midfield, I think, / the wings, Bailey Scott, Taron Thomas, Davies Uniacke, Simpkin, and Wardlaw are the players that I'm confident can kind of be in our best 25 for the medium term. I'm also confident that Fisher and Stevens can do that. We've traded them in, and I think they can do that for us. So the other players that right now are kind of in our best 22 that I'm not certain on. I mean, Core, I don't think will be playing for that long. Goda and McDonald and Bergman, I think are wait and sees for different reasons. Ford, Comben, and we know Ford showed a lot this year. I'm just not sure I'm not certain on him yet, I guess. Like, I'd like to see him back it up next year. Comben, we know injuries have been a problem. Cherry, similar. Coleman Jones, injuries / he just didn't look great except for that 1 month that he played this year. Braden George is another one that we haven't seen yet, but he's certainly got time. Tom Powell, Will Phillips, inconsistency and lack of opportunity. So there's still a good half a team there that I'm not sure on, which I think speaks to where we're at. And I think the fact that we're going to get some players in during the draft that could slot straight in there. I'm expecting 1 or 2 that we draft a straight away, because we've got those really high picks, and generally speaking, those high picks can play pretty quickly. So that's where it's at in terms of our depth. We know like Hamish Free's the only ruck that I've got sitting in the emergencies, so to speak, at the moment. We've got forwards coming out our ears, like Turner, Harvey, Drury, Hanson Jr., Curtis Taylor, Jack Marnie. And just on that, Kane Turner and Jack Marnie are the 2 left that don't currently have a contract. Just looking at the rest of the list there, like they're the 2 because Daniel Howe has retired. So it'll be interesting to see if either of those are recontracted, get a 1-year deal. It'll probably depend on how many delisted free agents we pick up and how many picks we want to use in the draft. But yeah, they're the 2 that potentially could fall out because they're not contracted yet for next year. Bonner is the other one. So 3. You'd think Bonner, we're kind of waiting to see what we can get key defensive stock-wise. And then, yeah, I don't know what the weighting is specifically for Turner and Marnie, but they're not signed up yet. So still plenty of list turnover to come. I do not expect all 3 of them to get contracts. It's probably 1 or 2 of them. But I think it's going to depend on what we're able to get in. So I don't really want to make a prediction on that at this point. So I think that's really, for the midway point of the trade period, that's where it's at. We've certainly still got some work to do, but I'm not expecting anything massive for us for the rest of the trade period. Who knows? I mean, Clayton Oliver was a massive story for sort of 3 or 4 days there. It came out of nowhere. So there could be something that comes out of nowhere. But yeah, it doesn't seem like, based on the media talk, that something's going to jump out at us and surprise us. So yeah, we've got 3 days to look forward to. Then the delisted free agency period goes beyond the trade period, so there's still chances to pick up stuff there. You're also able to trade picks after the player trade period ends, so there's potential for draft trading to happen right up until the draft, really. There's a couple of windows that open and close. So, look, you never know, but we'll certainly in the future, we'll look at what the draft might look like for us. That's all I've got for the men's side. I do, as I mentioned earlier, I've got a quick update on the AFLW side, who have been going along swimmingly. They had a massive win against Port Adelaide today. I'm recording just after that, where they belted them by 63 points. So another good win for the girls. They started a bit slow, but once they got going, usual suspects, Riddell, Garner, Mia King, through the midfield were fantastic. O'Loughlin kicked 3 goals today, and Randall kicked 2. Riddell kicked 2. So, yeah, a big win again for the girls. Takes them up to a 6-1 after the 7 rounds, and they're sitting pretty comfortably in second, only behind the Adelaide Crows, who are still undefeated. Melbourne's playing at the moment. Can I get a score on them? Oh no, they're not playing yet. They're playing in about an hour's time. So if they win, they'll be equal on points with us again, but it's unlikely that they're going to go past us percentage-wise. So yeah, the only loss we've had so far was against Brisbane by 2 points, who are a bit of a bogey side for us. The rest of it's been pretty successful for the girls. So 2 massive games coming up against Melbourne, who are currently third, as I said, and Adelaide, who are currently first, as I said. So that's our next 2 games. Both of them away. I mean, obviously Melbourne away just means that we're not playing at Arden Street, but they will be travelling to Adelaide in round 9. And I think really they need to win one of them to lock up a top 2 spot. Plenty can happen. There's still 3 rounds to go, but I think, yeah, to get that top 2 spot, they're going to have to win one of them. I'd love to see them knock off Adelaide, just, because that would be a massive scalp given that Adelaide are undefeated, but I'd be more than happy if we could split those 2 games. We've got the Dogs in the last round who are currently winless, so you would hope that that's, a nice easy win and a confidence booster going into finals. And then, yeah, hopefully we're finishing first or second and able to play in that home qualifying final. But we'll have to wait and see. They've been in ripping form. I mean, this is the first year that I've really paid close attention to it. And, yeah, there's just some fantastic players there. I do worry that the sort of, the 20th player down is maybe a weakness of ours, because it's such a massive drop off from those top 5 to say the bottom 5. But I think that's the case for most AFLW sides and most AFL sides, to be fair. It's just, I think at AFLW in that competition, the difference looks a bit more stark, I think. Because, yeah, when Riddell and Garner and Mia King are chaining up through the middle, it looks a lot different to the way it looks if there's some other players there. Jasmine Ferguson looks fantastic in defence. Like we've got everything. We've got all the parts. It's just, I do think we go in and out of games a little bit. I mean, that Port Adelaide game, it was a really slow start. The Geelong game, going back several weeks, we were really slow to get into the game. So it's just whether or not we are able to tune in and engage for the entirety of the match, really. And that's what's gonna make a difference in finals. But yeah, some water go under the bridge before we get there. And that's it for the podcast. As I said, a couple of days left in the trade period, 3 rounds left in the AFLW season before finals. So still plenty to talk about. I will do a trade period wrap up podcast, hopefully next weekend, and hopefully there's stuff to talk about or new things to talk about. We can certainly have a look at potentially what the best side looks like after the trade period and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'll do a trade period wrap up pod hopefully next weekend, and then yeah, we'll have a couple more podcasts going into November with the draft and that kind of thing. We'll probably, like I did, look back at our trade periods. I might do a bit of a retrospective look back at at draft periods, and then we can do a bit of a draft preview coming into that mid to late November. So still a fair bit of content to come. If you do have any suggestions or things that you'd like to hear or for me to talk about, feel free to hit me up on Twitter, or X as it's called. I'm certainly open to suggestions. But yeah, I think I'll rest my voice. It's been a little while since I've been on the microphone. My poor old voice is a bit strained. So yeah, that's all from me. I hope everyone's had a good couple of weeks, and the next week brings you some joy. The weather's sort of threatening to warm up. We sort of get a couple of warm days, and then we go back to the cold. Those of us that live in Melbourne anyway, which is probably most of my listeners. So yeah, weather's starting to clear up. We're coming into the end of the AFLW season, and yeah, it's all coming up. So speak to you, probably in a week or so. And yeah, I mean, you know how it goes in the podcast. Go. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. Please subscribe to the podcast on your app and give me a rating or a review if you can. I'd really appreciate it. You can find me on all social media at NorthPod Show. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Threads, you name it, I'm there. I'll see you next episode.